Got Your Eers On is brought to you by Tactical Legion 9.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Got Your Eers On. Guido here along with Scoot.
Yo.
And Johnson.
Guido, we're taking you back to 2003, 2004 with realignment talk.
It's realignment talk. Didn't we? I feel like we were talking about realignment not that long ago. I don't remember, but yeah. So something happened in the last 2 weeks. And let me just start off by saying that we will readily admit, and I think most WVU fans will readily admit, none of us have ever been Big 12 fans. Like, we've never been like, we're in the Big 12.
No, that is correct.
I think that when, the Big East was falling apart and, football's a moneymaker and we had to find a place to go, we were happy that we got on a good life preserver with the Big 12 and it was a place to be. Unfortunately, at the time, we didn't realize that it was a sinking ship. And here we are with Texas and Oklahoma, who have apparently for about a year, 6 months or a year, been, through back channels, working to get out of the Big 12. And now they have officially, as of Friday, signed and left, and they're going to the SEC. And again, we'll get into it because there's a lot to unpack here, folks. But apparently it's a couple of years, but it's going to be in the next 2 years. I mean, it'll happen anyways.
Guido, it's as if you're familiar with the game Among Us.
Yes.
It's as if the Big 12 spaceship was flying through the air and Texas and OU were the imposters. Bob Bowlesby was trying to say they were looking a little sus. And they went ahead and sabotaged the entire conference spaceship, and now we're all trying to figure out what we're doing.
So let me ask you this, Scoot. I just want to start off, let's start with before we talk about what's happening with WVU, let's talk about the Big 12 and the train wreck that it is. So Big 12 Media Day is the first media day of any of the Power 5 conferences. It was 2 weeks ago. Nobody really cares because it's mid-July and people really aren't paying attention. It was like the same day as the Major League Baseball All-Star game. It was weird. But anyways, Bob Bowlesby gets up in his press conference and he pretty much says that realignment's dead. Nobody's, because of the way TV is now, nobody's ever going to realign. Everybody's staying where they are. Nothing's going to happen with realignment. Fast forward like 2 days later, and here's Texas and Oklahoma, leaving the league. Is that Bob Bowlesby being completely unaware of what's happening in his league? Or is that the fact that he was trying to get Texas and Oklahoma to be scared and not leave?
I think part of it is some naivete. It's a fancy word. Yeah, I think he was somewhat oblivious to what was going on. And maybe, I don't want to say, I don't want to say lazy. He wasn't lazy. I think he was too comfortable, maybe is what I'm looking at. I think he thought, listen, we're in a pretty good shape. We've got a TV contract that runs out, 2025? We've got Oklahoma and Texas. They're very powerful and well-known brands. We're a pretty strong league. We're called the Big 12, yet we have 10 teams, which that part doesn't make any sense. But I think he was, I don't want to say head in the sand, but I think he just was maybe almost too confident in thinking that nothing wrong could happen. I don't know that he was really trying to I don't know that he knew any of this was going on and trying to talk them into hey, you guys need to stay kind of stuff. But I think he was oblivious to it, to be honest.
I think he got totally outmaneuvered. I mean, come on, you're the commissioner. You got to have your
right.
Even if this is hard to believe and you don't really see it coming, I think you've constantly got to have your finger on the pulse. And I think he got totally outmaneuvered.
Yeah, I think he got blindsided. I don't think he had any idea that this was happening.
Me either.
And I think he looks like a fool. And then I think he made himself look even more like a fool when a few days later he starts blaming ESPN for this and he sends out that cease and desist.
Yeah, I think he certainly then was like, if I'm going down, then we're all. It felt very lashing back out. I mean, I'm sure that he's not wrong. I mean, It's a very believable thing that we've now pieced together, kind of prompting the AAC to come in and get 3 to 5 teams, maybe all 8 teams. But I mean, it seems like he's then just starts throwing fists everywhere.
What concerns me, Guido, is the like you alluded to, right? Oklahoma and Texas said that they're going to abide by the agreement and they'll leave. They're going to adhere to the agreement and leave by 2025. We all know that they're probably not going to abide by that agreement.
Sure.
That indeed they'll pay the payout or the buyout. I should say not payout,
or
but the
negotiate
buyout.
it or something.
Yeah, right.
Whatever. Right.
And right now they're saying that could be roughly $150 million from the 2 teams to the rest of the conference.
Right.
However, if the Big 12 falls apart or a team or 2 leaves in the meantime, then they're off the hook.
Yeah, it excuses them from that. Yeah.
And so it's kind of for me, and I'm going to say this from my point of view, I don't want to wait around for money that could possibly happen, because I think if we wait around to try to keep this Big 12 together for the sake of getting money and possibly, I don't know, trying to add teams, who's to say that Oklahoma State and Iowa State don't jump and go to the Big Ten and leave us high and dry, and then we're not getting that cash?
Yeah, that's obviously hanging out there. But I think that's the wild card here, because there's also language, Guido, you're probably going to get to that, but in those TV contracts, there's already language in there that if membership shifts or changes dramatically, they're at liberty to change those payouts anyway. So I think, to me, it's sort of like a chicken and the egg thing, because obviously we don't want to stay here because you've just taken the 2 marquee names out, and obviously that's going to change the marketing power and the payouts across the board. But how much, I guess? I mean, I would say it's extremely significant. Even if you patch back in, we're now hearing all this speculation about rating the AAC before they rate us, and pulling in like a UCF and Houston and some of these other teams. But you're not going to cobble together, even if you cobble together 4, 6 more teams, I don't know, say, whatever the number is, I don't think you're replacing anywhere near, you're not even getting close. You're going to get a fraction of the value that just left your conference.
I would argue those 4 or 6 teams don't add up to the ones that are left in the conference.
Yeah, right. I agree. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
what I'm saying. So I think Bob Bowlesby is presenting it as, hey, we're going to be here through 2025 because we're abiding by these contracts. I think any practical person, like, this conversation we're having, that completely changes the whole thing, because they're not going to come back to you with the same value.
Yeah, and I think everybody knows, including Bob Bowlesby, even though he's saying it, that's not going to happen. Like, there's a shift somewhere, and it's just a matter of where do all of these teams fall. I think what's different, Johnson, for this time in conference realignment than what it was, 12 years ago, right? Is that what it is now? 10 years ago? I don't even remember. What year was it?
Well, I mean, 2005, I think, is the first year that those teams started playing in the ACC, if you're talking about, like the Pitts, Boston colleges.
Boston College, all that. I think the thing that's different now is it's not about, back then that it was about, for ESPN and for all of the major networks, it was about cable box subscriptions. It was about people who were buying cable boxes and putting cable boxes in their houses, and that's who they cared about then, and that's what was going to pay the bills. That's out the door now. Like, that doesn't matter. So I think where West Virginia, because that's what we were a podcast about, where West Virginia is sitting in a good position here compared to some of the other Big 12 schools, is West Virginia, from a media pool, it does better than all those Big 12 schools. So when you look at subscriptions, when you look at, like, Johnson and I, and Scooty too, like, we're the dopes who sign up for ESPN Plus, and like, when we follow all the West Virginia stuff, when you start looking at that stuff, it puts WVU in a better situation, than some of these other schools. That's why, everybody who's freaked out about WVU going to the AAC and having to play East Carolina every year, I think it's kind of unfounded, because WVU is too big of a commodity for these networks for them to go and play and to lose that, those subscriptions. And I think that's where it all falls different this time.
Well, the only thing I would counter to that, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think that the difference to me is this feeling of this this growing conversation, you know, ever since that happened, Guido. So you're referencing kind of like, what do we call in that, realignment 1 or something, you know, we'll call this V1 or something. Back in V1, we were constantly talking about the Power 5 and 5, you know, and even going to super conferences of 16 teams and things like that. But and so we were always thinking of that many slots at the table. And I think what's changed this time is this now, like, we haven't really talked about it on Twitter a whole lot because we've been sort of like, hey, get us in the ACC and stuff like that. You know, that chatter is going on. But I feel like there's this undercurrent of the difference being the goalposts have now moved, and it's not 64 or 65 teams in the mix or whatever. It's possibly like 48 teams in the mix or something. And that's where my anxiety kicks up, because where does WVU fall in that? I still think they're a super powerful brand. I think, you know, it's a shame they're not already in an Eastern Conference. I think they do command a big fan base that follows them all over the place. You know, WVU used to be known for almost getting into bowl games simply because those entities knew that WVU would bring such a following and spend a lot of money and sell out stadiums.
Right.
So I think that still is in their favor. But to me, I think this weird undercurrent of talk, like maybe the SEC and ACC team up in a super conference, and then there's like tiered portions of the NCAA, you know, and what tier do you fall in and stuff like that. I think that's where my anxiety rises differently from the way it did in, you know, say 2004 or something.
I'm just saying, I think that West Virginia, unlike the last time we went through this as a school, I think West Virginia is in a much better position now to be put or to move or to be taken by the ACC. You know, one, it's not about television market anymore. Like, Pitt's not going to complain, oh, we're going to lose TV screens because of WVU. That's not going to be a problem like it was. I mean, I don't think I know in the past it's been things like academics. Like, for me, academics, ACC shouldn't say anything about academics. I mean, considering our students do their actual schoolwork where UNC's students don't do their actual schoolwork. So we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and
but
I think that's always like, it seems so foolish to me in a obviously money driven, millions, almost billions of dollars driven conversation that we would, when it comes to us, we'd start to talk about academics. That seems like such a false narrative.
And I think the last thing, and probably the most important thing, if I were the ACC right now, is I would want to add some big names. I would tell Notre Dame they got to play or get out for everything. I would let WVU in, or maybe look, I mean, Cincinnati's an okay program, but like find another, you know, maybe even a Kansas or, you know, an Iowa State, one of those, you know, more Eastern of the Big 12 schools, if you could say that, because just for the fact that ACC's got to watch their back, because the SEC's not done.
I'd rather see us pick up, like if we go ACC, I'd rather see like a Central Florida, to be honest with you, go to the ACC with us than a Cincinnati or a Iowa State myself. But
I think the bigger fact is the ACC's got to watch their back, because the SEC is going to come after Florida State and Clemson. If they got Texas and OU, and like anybody can say what they want. Everybody can say, well, SEC was like, oh, well, we didn't reach out. They contacted us and blah. The SEC, from day one, has been about complete and total domination of college football, but college athletics. And the SEC is, I believe, and this is conspiracy talk here, Scooty, you might like that, SEC is trying to get out of the NCAA. The SEC wants to be their own thing. You know, they throw enough barbs, and Mark Emmert's, you know, I don't even know where Mark Emmert is. He's hiding somewhere. He's in a shack in the middle of Indiana right now. Like,
I think that talk is way down the road, if that were to be a thing. I don't know that that's imminent.
What's way down the road to you, then?
At least 10 years. At least 10 years. 10
years ain't that far, Scooty. 10 years isn't that far.
I don't see that happening. What I do think, and I've read a little bit, is that the Florida State, Clemson, I think part of the reason why some of these other SEC schools went along with it was they're not in Texas, so they're not Texas A&M, who even though they did vote to accept Texas and Oklahoma, I had heard that those other schools like South Carolina and Florida might have voted no had somebody said, let's bring in Florida State and Clemson. But, I mean, that's all, again, hearsay, and we're not in these meetings and rooms and all that.
But back to what you were talking about with the ACC, my skepticism isn't from previous. I mean, it is a bit from previous history, but I think right now, Guido, you pointed me to that Pete Thamel article that we can link in. I mean, it's about a week old now when this whole discussion got started, but it really started to detail some of the points that I was already worried about. One, I didn't realize how bad the ACC's television contract is with ESPN. It's really bad. It's
bad.
Each one of those schools gets anywhere from like 5 to 10 million less than what a Big 12 school would get right now. So what WVU is raking in each year, and they're locked into that through 2036. So to me, that's such a big barrier for them to be motivated to take on another mouth to feed. And I think that's the only way I would see them expanding is if they could get Notre Dame in the mix. And I listened to Mike Casazza recently on his podcast, and he made a good point about everything. Now, it's certainly hit the pause button. I think all this chaos has hit the pause on the 12-team playoff. But when that does move to a 12-team playoff, there's an interesting way that Notre Dame fits in as, like, in any given year, they would really only be able to be about the fifth seeded team, maybe sixth seeded team, because they're not in a conference, and you're going to load that bracket in with the conference champions first. And I thought that was interesting, and maybe a possible, who knows, maybe not a big leverage point, but maybe a point of attack for the ACC to say, hey, get in here, get in a conference. They obviously bring a huge amount of money. And then I think then maybe the conference is in a position to say, okay, now we definitely have more money to split around. It's not going to hurt us as much to bring another mouth to feed at the table. And a team like WVU maybe gets in because now there's more, it's not a deficit for them. Right now, I can't see them expanding and bringing WVU in to split this even more ways when it's not really super attractive to them. They're not happy with it to begin with, Guido.
I think the challenge is, I think WVU would have a great chance if they could pair themselves with Notre Dame. I think that the problem is that Notre Dame's, like, they've been independent forever. And, like, I don't think they ever leave that.
I don't think they have a big motivation to not be independent when they have NBC in their pocket the way they do. To me, I don't see why they would do that. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe there's a tiny leverage there with the college football playoff. But I guess I say all of that to say I'm preparing myself, Guido, for a revamped Big 12 that WVU plays in with more of these teams from the AAC that we're seeing. Because for one thing, I don't see any of this moving quickly. Like, I can see us at least playing a couple seasons in some revamped conference and then hopefully jumping into something that's bigger and better, because I people have speculated maybe the Pac-12 goes after or reaches out to Oklahoma State. I think that all, maybe the big with Kansas and Iowa State, those things all make sense to me. But the Pac-12 also isn't in the best way right now either with their TV contract and the way their payouts work for their schools. So to me, I just find it's some more, I was telling Scoot kind of when this all started, I feel like we need more chaos. I feel like we need more, we need like, more stuff to gum up the gears here for movement for WVU to hit one of these conferences. I think if this is the only move and things say status quo, I'm not sure these conferences are motivated enough to just hurry up and add more teams and split these payouts. I hope I'm wrong, but that's the cynical side right now.
For me, worst case scenario would be ACC looks to add somebody and they pick up Cincinnati and don't pick us up. I don't want to see us somehow
I can't imagine they do that.
Like, I wouldn't think so either, but listen, I didn't think Syracuse would ever be in the ACC. I didn't think Boston College, when they went to the ACC, would ever be in the ACC because they were so outside the typical regional footprint. So I think that kind of changed my mind as to how things go. And once conferences started taking these teams outside of their areas, it's, I think, opened up everything for me.
And Guido, one other thing just before we leave that, I guess early, I'm looking at a tweet I had bookmarked from July 23rd where Stuart Mandel had said that he referenced at the Big 12 leadership meetings, apparently, at least in discussion, it was talked about maybe approaching the Pac-12 about like a merger of teams and making like a 20 plus odd team conference. I guess what do you guys think about something like that if that were to happen?
I just would hate how
it pulls us even farther west.
Further away. Yeah, right. Like, do we want to go and
I
play
think maybe
you?
they do that, but we step out. I don't see us going along. I just think from
I bring it up because I think you've already taxed the fan base a lot on watching, what was the Cactus Bowl game that one night we stayed up till like 3 a.m, finishing that out. It feels like we're part of that like Pac-12 after dark Twitter hashtag. That's fine when I'm bored and it's 1 a.m. and I'm just, watching some football, but I wouldn't want that to start to be a regular part of my viewing.
And they don't want it either. Like, Oregon doesn't want to come and play in Morgantown a 1 o'clock game on a Saturday.
I'd be surprised, yeah.
And then it's another series of forced rivalries, right? Oh, we got to watch that big-time Arizona State WVU rival. Like, it's not a rivalry. It'll never be a rivalry.
I think it was this article, and I need to refresh myself, but I think it was this article that said, maybe he was just saying, like, don't count anything out. Maybe they get creative. They have neutral site games where the time zones are like, central somewhere. I mean, it was really off in left field, but apparently it was floated out there at like in Big 12 discussions.
So I want to throw, and I know how I feel about this, and I don't feel the way I'm going to make it sound, but let me just throw this idea out, Scoot. So I want to hear your opinion on it. So let's just say it is all a mess, and it all does fall apart, and we end up in the AAC, right? And we're in there with Temple and, what is it, Central Florida and Tulane and Navy. We're by far probably the best program in that. So now we're in a conference where we're winning championships every year. Does that change your perspective on this? Would you rather play against I'm
going to say no.
Temple?
I'm going to say no because look at Central Florida. Central Florida went undefeated and they had to declare themselves the national champion because they didn't get invited to the college football playoff. That would become reality for us. We could end up going undefeated year in and year out and most likely not get an invite to the college football playoff, even if it is expanded, because we're not going to be in quote-unquote a power conference any longer. We're going to be in a conference that we should dominate and should be top 2, top 3 every year in and year out.
And I think it becomes really hard to do that, Scoot. I mean, we're making the assumption that we can, like right now, Neil Brown is killing it on the recruiting trail. And to me, I think it starts to undercut a lot of that work because how do you get guys excited to play the teams we'd be playing?
And even worse,
when our neighbors can say, come to the ACC, for example.
Even worse, what if we don't? What if we don't do well in that conference?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we're making the assumption, but what if you hit a bad
you
patch? You
don't do well in that conference?
Yeah.
It doesn't set you back a year or two. It sets you back 5. And it costs coaches jobs because, the expectations from the fan base is going to be, listen, if we're in the AAC, we better be AAC champions year in and year out. That's going to be the expectation.
Yeah, right.
If you go 6-6 and you're not sticking around.
Well, let me put it in perspective a little bit, though. And this is where I was all freaked out and I was worried. And I was like, oh, we're going to end up in the AAC or we're going to be Conference USA football foes against Marshall. Like, I was like, this is like worst case scenario.
Yeah, well, it sends you there, doesn't it? I mean, it sends you.
Because I'm a West Virginia fan. Like, we're WVU fans. That's what we do.
We're wired that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, I started diving more. And here's the thing. At the end of the day, and I don't care what anybody says, it's about money. Like, this is all about money. And it's actually kind of it's actually kind of funny. I'll use that phrase. It's kind of funny. It's kind of apropos that this happened, 15 days after name and likeness goes into place as well, because for years, all of these college institutions have been saying, well, these students, they don't need to be paid because they're getting a free education, and it's not about money. It's about playing and getting your education. And then you have Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, and it's strictly 100% about money. Like, it's not about anything else. It's about money. And so I think it's funny that all of that happens. But if you talk about money and college athletics, WVU is 40th, ranked 40th in athletic revenue. So in the of all of the D1 schools, they are the 40th. So that puts us in a good place. I mean, we're above schools in the ACC like North Carolina, Georgia Tech. There are schools that we are above Virginia Tech. So there are schools that we have a better revenue generation than they do. And I think for us, that puts us in a nice position to be able to get into the ACC. And I'm going to say this, guys, I don't necessarily think the SEC is done. And I think the SEC will gladly go to 20 if they could find the right 2 more teams. And I mean, I don't think it would be fun for us. Like, I don't really want to go to the SEC just because I think we would become the Mississippi State of the SEC. Like, it would be, 5-5 seasons, 5-win seasons forever. But I'm just saying, I think that we're Power 5 or whatever it's going to end up being, Power 4 when this is all done.
Well, I certainly hope you're right. And I'm with you. I mean, I have been arguing on Twitter that I find it hard to believe we'd be left out as well. I think it's silly that we haven't been in the ACC to begin with for decades now, but I guess I'm just wondering if it's one of those things where we finally get into the ACC and then we walk in the front door and we realize like Clemson and Florida State aren't there anymore. That's the odd thing to me that
and for me, Johnson, though, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I would say, okay, so say that the SEC poaches Clemson and Florida State and WVU gets added in and maybe Cincinnati gets added in. I still think for us, that's a good time. Like, I think we're enjoying playing Syracuse and Pitt, and I think it's a good time for us.
No, and I'm not saying it's not. I just don't want anything to be watered down. Like, I want to join a conference at full strength. I want to be a part of that. I want to be in the mix with, being able to play powerhouse teams.
And I'll say this. I mean, if for some reason somehow the SEC is somehow we ended up, maybe Shane Lyons with his Alabama background somehow has an in to get us an additional spot in the SEC, I'll take that as well. I'll play as a fan. You're telling me that we have a chance to see like an LSU or a Georgia or
you'd be crazy. Yeah, you'd be crazy.
I'd take that in a heartbeat. Sure. I can find a rival out of those teams pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I guess.
Will we not be as dominant? Sure. We're not looking to. We would have a tough time. We'd have to kind of like the Big 12. It'd have to be kind of a perfect storm of some good recruiting, good scheduling.
As dominant, we've averaged 7-5 since 2012. We're not dominating anybody. Okay,
well, that's what I'm saying.
We kind of get stuck in Pat White, Steve Slayton, good old days land. But I just want us to land somewhere where I can root again for. I can put my heart back in it and not have to act like I'm excited to play Texas Tech and these teams I don't give 2 craps about, right? And I'd like that, and I'd also like to be a part of if you do well here, you're guaranteed to be in the new playoff conversation. That's what I don't want another relegated to a place where, you did great, but only one of your wins is really a quality. You know what I mean? I don't want that again. We've lived that before.
And we're talking strictly football here. And we forget too that for the ACC, we have a lot to bring to the table with basketball as well, especially with now that, Huggins would actually be probably the big name coach in the ACC at this point if we went in. So I think that WVU has a lot to bring to the table. I just don't know. I'm with you, Johnson, on the fact that I don't know what the timeline for this is. I don't think it's going to move fast.
Yeah, I feel like that's the wild card.
Yeah, I feel like, I think we would be lucky if we knew what was happening a year from today. Like, if a year from today we could say, hey, we're going to this conference, that would be amazing. I think a year from today we're going to be like, well, Texas is leaving and we're getting Houston and we're getting whoever, and we're going to see what happens with the Big 12 for another 2 years. And I think that money plays a factor in that with the buyouts. And and like you said, Twitter has just been crazy, Johnson. There's been as you say, a slew of questionable tweets over the past few weeks.
Feels like it.
There are people out there that say that that Houston and UCF and Memphis isn't so bad. Like, Scooty, how do you feel about that?
That's a big sigh.
So
pretty
again,
bad.
Houston, I don't like Houston in anything. Like I'll be honest, and this is my Northeast bias. Okay, I get that Phi Slamma Jamma was there, Clyde Drexler, Hakeem Olajuwon. Okay, I get that. But other than that, I didn't know that they were a college when I was in high school. Like, I mean, they didn't play on the big stage. So Houston does not get me excited. Memphis, maybe a little bit in basketball. They've got Penny Hardaway. Football, it does nothing for me. And who was the third one that you mentioned? Memphis.
UCF.
UCF, basketball-wise, had nothing but Taco Fall. That was the only reason why you would ever want to watch their games, because he is a 7'6" string bean of
Freak
a basketball player. Yeah,
right.
And then football, they had when they had Scott Frost coaching, they were fairly dominant. He did a good job. I mean, their football is good, but who are they playing?
I just feel like those three schools.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Like,
why are we even talking?
Like,
Scoot, you already know the answer. We don't care. We already have Kansas State, Texas Tech. I mean, we already Oklahoma State's the Myrtle Beach of college football. Like, I don't care about any of these teams. They're all terrible teams. The fans at their stadium barely show up. They probably show up and watch TikTok the whole time because they are not even interested. I mean, what we need we need to show up and play against teams in a conference that we actually care about again. And I'm just praying that we get a little bit more. We just need a little bit more craziness to motivate these conferences to invite us and get us in. We had some speculation about Penn State and Rutgers and Maryland being happy to have a WVU around because that would give them a natural rivalry again. I think people want that. It's just, will that matter? I mean, that I've been reading a lot of Twitter lately about, this would be so great for the ACC because of all these natural rivalries and stuff. And, there's people at the ACC reading this that's cute. None of this it's completely irrelevant. No one cares about that. They just care about, can we get a more valuable contract and then get these payouts to our member schools even higher. And that's what's going to matter. And that's why I think it's going to be so hard to read how quickly this moves and what exactly moves the needle that motivates them to get a team like WVU in. It's not going to be, when you start talking about UCF and Houston and Memphis and these other teams, they're fine. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to berate those schools, but they don't move the needle in a way that would make anything valuable for WVU. And it scares me that if we were kind of lumped into that pile, then Guido, we read some articles. What the payouts are $6-7 million. You're not talking even hardly a fraction of what we enjoy right now. So that's scary to me.
I think, and on top of everything else, Shane Lyons gets mentioned by Pete Thamel as a possible replacement AD at Mizzou, which I think is far-fetched and I'm not too concerned about. But then you start thinking, and I think Shane Lyons is the right person for the job right now. I'm very confident in where we are and what Shane Lyons has done and where he could probably get us, as opposed to where we got put by, Oliver Luck in, the last go around on this.
Yeah. And I think that is one thing to take some comfort in, right? As we have Dr. Gee and Shane Lyons. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find, people that are as connected as they are, and people kind of guiding the process right now. So that's kind of where I'm putting my confidence, and I'm hoping we see the benefit of that.
And I also think that you've got to remember that WVU has some good connections right now in the ACC with, Clemens and a few other people where they can help us make that connection. I am sure that the moment this happened, that Shane Lyons' first call, was to, somebody connected with the ACC saying, hey, we're interested if you want to go out sometime. We'd love to go out and hang and have a beer.
Right.
Give us a buzz. Hope you guys are doing well. It was great seeing you on TV last week. I think that's the kind of stuff that has to be happening.
Well, and I
right
think
now.
you're already seeing that on some of WVU's social media. They put a really nice tweet out last week about how they're an R1 research institution. And that's like,
that was 100% pointed
yeah,
right
I mean,
at the
that's
ACC.
like when
there's no way that wasn't. I saw
that's
that
like
too.
when you're taking pictures on Instagram because like this girl that you're trying to ask out is going to see them and stuff. That's what that totally feels like to me.
It's going to be an interesting, 12, 18 months of seeing what happens here. And I think the bad part about all of this is I think that Neil Brown and the WVU football team were doing so good at recruiting. And this is one of those situations where I think it really can hurt, some of those soft commits that you already have, some of those 4 stars that have already said, we're coming to you. And now you've got schools, I'm sure, like a lot of these schools, the first call to some of these players are, hey, did you hear? WVU's in the Big 12 and the Big 12's falling apart.
Yeah, that's got to be happening in the background in some cases. But credit to them, it doesn't seem to be slowing them down any right now. I mean, they're putting together, I think we're up to like a 23rd nationally ranked class right now, Guido. I think it was maybe second in the conference. So you can't feel any better about that. Hopefully it doesn't undercut any of that work that they're doing.
And I think it's also great, the school has, done well. I mean, and this is another thing that, again, I think will help us with conference realignment. Virginia Tech games sold out like quickly,
right.
Very, very quickly. Yep. When the tickets went on sale, so I think that we're in a good position, Scooty. The WVU-ness in me gets nervous, gets the agita. I'm a little. I want answers.
We need it to play out a little bit. I think what's hurt us is that we see all this information coming so fast, and the information probably was there. It's just a matter of somebody actually officially saying it. That's kind of caught us all off guard, and I think that's why we're thinking, oh crap, well, wait a minute, let's try to find something for us then real quick.
Yeah.
And it's not that fast, like you guys are saying. I'd like to think we'd have a better idea within 6 months as to what path we're pursuing. I'd like to think that some leaks would get out at that point, but we'll see. I just don't want to get left like UConn got left. That's and I say that having family in Connecticut. I know that UConn is still reeling from the fact that they got left in the AAC. Now, they had some issues with their football program, notwithstanding, but it wasn't until recently where they decided to go back to the Big East and leave football independent that the fans are actually like excited again for basketball, and that was the big driving force at UConn was basketball in the first place. Nobody was getting excited to watch UConn play SMU or schools in the AAC.
I think that's WVU's, and for me as a fan, that's my biggest fear is to end up like UConn.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I know the institution is fine and survives, but the programs have been hit hard.
Sure.
Well, and if you remember, we at the time of the last realignment, there was some worry amongst WVU fans that when Louisville got asked to go to the ACC, that UConn would probably go with them and leave WVU kind of out in the cold before we had found the Big 12. So there was some worry as to whether or not WVU would actually be chosen over UConn, but that was also based on TV markets and things of that sort, and they were still trying to nail down a footprint in the New York City, Boston area. So,
well, it was all about TV markets and all of that, and it's not about that anymore.
Right.
The technology has made it.
So we'll just have to see.
Not about that anymore. Yeah. Well, guys, we've got a lot of stuff happening. Josh Whitt is going to be on our next segment, so don't go anywhere. We'll be talking to him about WVU basketball and some NBA stuff. So, and check his show out too, because we're on his show this week, guys. So that was a good time, and we're glad that we got to be on his show. But yeah, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Josh Whitt from Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about WVU basketball, and talk to him right after this. You're listening to Got Your Eers On.
Vortec Knives is a West Virginia owned and operated company specializing in high quality steel, fast opening, everyday carrying knives. If you go to vortechknives.com today and use the code GYEO, you get a 25% discount on your entire order. That's Vortek, VORTEK knives.com, a West Virginia owned and operated company specializing in fast opening, high quality, everyday carry knives. Vortech Knives.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Got Your Ears On. Guido along with Scoot and Johnson. Don't forget, you can find us on the social medias. Look for us on Instagram, Twitter, all of those places at Got Your Ears. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search Got Your Ears On. Guys, we're super excited to have our good friend and fellow podcast hoster, Josh Whitt from Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about WVU basketball. Actually, I think in the current climate, Josh, we should really rename your podcast to Reasonable Doubt. Like, it just should be Reasonable Doubt.
It's a lot in doubt right now, right, guys? It's kind of crazy.
It could be also, what did I used to call it, like unscripted, unnecessary consequences or something? Yeah.
Unnecessary proposition.
Yeah, it's what it could also be here before too long.
It's a little crazy right now, as we talked about in segment one with all the conference stuff. But Josh, I kind of wanted to get your take on some WVU basketball stuff, starting with Deuce. So Deuce was getting a lot of hype early on in the draft. He was first round. He dropped. Some people were saying he was going to pick 18th or 15th. I saw in one place. He ended up getting picked in the second round by the Knicks. Should he have stayed at WVU, Josh? Should he have done another year?
No, and here's why. In my opinion, one man's opinion. So, how much Deuce? The key for the NBA draft in my lifetime, as far as more certainty, is the lottery section of the draft. So, being the first 14, 15 picks, that's a more known quantity. The guides and the mock drafts, they're pretty close on those first 14 or 15, change of order or whatever. Once you get past that, 16 to whatever, it really is a crapshoot. Somebody could reach for somebody in the first round. Somebody could fall to the second round. And guys, we saw, Jared Butler, I guess he could have came back for his fifth year. He was a second round guy. The guard from Illinois, like Big Ten superstar, falls to the second round. Really good players. And so when Deuce is projected in the late first round, let's say he comes back another year. Let's see he projects more middle of the first round. That increases the chances of being a first round pick, but you could still drop. There are guys in the second round that were mock draft and people had on their big boards of picking in the first round. So there's risk all the way around. I was excited for Deuce to be picked by the Knicks. It's a fit from a coaching style standpoint. The rub is that Thibodeau doesn't like to play rookies. So that's something that'll be working against Deuce in his first season. But short answers, Guido, I don't think you can judge where he got picked late first round, early second round as determining, yes, he should have come back versus being in the draft.
Yeah, I was a little bummed that it was the Knicks. I have to be honest. Like, I think, well, and, this might be more, but, the Knicks were great when we were all kids, like back in the, 80s and early 90s. Like, everybody loved the Patrick Ewing Knick days. But, like, I feel like the Knicks have been like a general management ownership train wreck the past like dozen or so years. And so I kind of worry about the fact of like, does somebody like Deuce just get lost in the jumping to G League, playing as a rookie, not playing, and you see it now. And this is something else to talk about on draft day. Jevon Carter now moving to his third team, kind of excited that he's going to Brooklyn because that's an amazing team. Kind of bummed he's going to Brooklyn because I don't think he's going to see the court much.
He's a second round pick. Just like Deuce was. He's on his third team. Free agency hasn't started, so you don't know who Brooklyn's going to bring into the roster for guards. And then once you know that, then that's who Jevon Carter is competing against. For me, guys, the rub with him being on the Nets and James Harden is a fantastic player. I don't like teams that he's on. That's just something that's me. And so him being on that team, it's really put me in the position for the first time in Carter's career of like rooting for Carter, indifferent about how the Nets do. And we'll be happy if they win, but not bummed if they lose because of that specific guy.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder too if, you know, Jevon had seemed to have become such a fan favorite in Phoenix. And I felt like, I mean, I don't know what you're thinking, Josh, but like on that Phoenix roster, I continuously felt like Jevon always had a chance to see the court. He always had, like, there were going to be minutes available for him. Now in the playoffs that did materialize, but I felt like with that roster, he could work into that. There was always a place for him. My first reaction with this Nets roster is I'm not really sure where how he works his way into that to see the court. I certainly hope so. And I think they probably are going to want his tenacity, I'm sure. And I mean, injuries happen, who knows? But at first glance, it feels like the road just to see some significant minutes is a bit tougher in Brooklyn.
It's odd to say that I think had he stayed with the Grizzlies, he actually probably would have had a clearer path to playing time, even though it didn't feel like that at the time. And I'll be honest, when he got traded to Phoenix, I thought, oh, the Phoenix Suns, that's not really a great team. Yeah, he'll probably play, but they're not going to do all that well. Well, I was wrong because they did really well. And as the season wore on, and more so the playoffs, his playing time decreased more and more. And I don't know that that's necessarily a statement on him, as more so it's a statement on the guys that they had, Booker and Chris Paul, being healthy and able to play. So that limited who actually saw the floor.
I think the key for both of them and what Carter can bank on, especially with the Nets, is his off the ball spot up shooting. I mean, the Nets, you've got two creators in Kyrie and Harden. They need a guy to stand in the corner and make a three. Jevon Carter, I'm taking this from somebody else's podcast. I believe he shot 40% from the corner last year. And so that skill, if he can keep that up, and that was the rub with Carter coming into the league, is how is he going to shoot the ball? And he had a rough first season with the Grizzlies, and he's improved his 3-point shot. And so the other thing with the Nets, load management is a big thing there. And so maybe that's where he gets his opportunities to get some minutes. And you know how hard Jevon Carter works. And so that's always going to be a positive no matter where he lands. I think there's a spot in the league. If you can shoot the ball and you keep that defensive intensity, nobody would say that Jevon Carter doesn't work hard. And so if he can shoot the ball and you know he's a good worker and a good teammate, I think he's going to find a spot, whether it's Brooklyn or wherever in the league. I think that's how he steps up. And I think that's going to be the key for Deuce as well, because he improved his 3-point shot in his second year. And that's going to have to be a staple when you're in the league. That's what's important, is finishing at the rim and getting threes. And it's interesting. I thought Deuce would have been great for Phoenix with his mid-range game, similar to Chris Paul. And maybe that's something that can stand out for the Knicks. So we'll see what happens, guys. It'll be interesting. But I do like him on the Eastern Coast, Eastern Standard Time, versus not catching Suns games or them being.
Nobody cares about the West Coast. That's a known fact.
Scoot's ready to cut it off and shove it into the Pacific Ocean.
That's
He's
right.
just done with it.
Rocky Mountains.
Well, oddly enough, this isn't an NBA. We don't talk NBA on this show. I you know, it's kind of strange. A WVU podcast here. Josh, how do you feel about this upcoming WVU basketball team this year? Are you excited? Are you pumped? You think this is going to be a winning team?
There's a lot of questions, Guido. I am always excited for basketball. I'm nervous about this team. That's not different than any other offseason. The angle for being nervous this year is the amount of turnover that we have. And that's just, even if we're getting 5-star guys, and I think we got good guys coming in. We just got the final pickup this week, a 16-year-old.
Yeah, how crazy is that?
You know what? I'm just going to go to college now, which is totally awesome. And he'll be redshirted, but like a 6'9" Doogie Howser of basketball. Again, I'm dating myself. But but we've got 7 new additions to the roster if you redshirt some of those guys. On the flip side, we've got 3 fifth-year guys coming in, and we have a lot of guys that are seniors that are on the team. So it's not like this. There's a lot of change, but we've got like 22, 23-year-old. Like, this is going to be a seasoned, experienced team despite having all these changes. But my concern going into the season, regardless of who's there, is just this much turnaround. I mean, and this many changes to the roster. With any situation, everybody's got to get on the same page. It's great to see them come to the TBT in Charleston as a team. So from an optics perspective, everybody jumping on a bus and being like a team, that's awesome. That gives you comfort of like they get along and stuff. But it's just, we're incorporating a bunch of guys, some of which we're going to be asked to contribute to the success of this team. So I think the talent is there. It's just a lot of new faces.
And I think what's really strange, we've talked about it on our show, and you may have mentioned on yours, is that Huggins generally brings in these transfers, and they've got a couple of years, 2 years, whatever. They've JUCOs. They've got a few years left of eligibility. We have a couple of transfers this year that are going to be starters that are going to play right off the bat and not get that that year of Huggins teaching them whatever Huggins basketball thought is. And so I think that's what makes it interesting this year. Where you got a guy like Malik Curry who's gonna be running point for this team probably from game one, and we've never seen him other than watching ODU games. We don't know what he's like.
This would be a good year for one of those European trips where you play I don't know, the Sons of Italy team, or I don't know, you play a bunch of these weird club teams. This would be
Sons of Italy. That's like a bunch of old guys that play bocce, and then they come out and play some basketball.
That's what we need. We need to play some old guys, but we need to play some of those teams just so they can get some feel for what to expect when they're playing against somebody else, not just themselves.
Yeah, and you know how those trips are. I swear, a lot of the times the basketball is almost secondary. It's almost just traveling together, getting to know each other, spending time with each other. So I feel the same way, and I think Josh hit it on the head. Some things we've talked about on some of our earlier podcasts that we were concerned about. It just feels like a whole lot of disparate pieces coming together to form this team, and you're going to get some early games before the Big 12 grinder starts, but I mean, not a whole lot. That's going to have to gel relatively quick, and then you're right into the Big 12 season. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, if anyone can do it, I mean, look, Hugs will get it together, but it feels like it's going to be a challenge.
Right. And it's not impossible, right, Johnson? I mean, you look at Arkansas, they have a ton of turnover, and they went deep into the tournament last year. The Fab Five, I'm dating myself, 5 new freshmen. Now they're 5-star, otherworldly. Most of those guys went to the NBA. But so it is possible. And so a better example is the Arkansas example, because it was last year. It's just it's a complete turnaround from what Huggins' MO has been in the past, where he tried it early in his WVU career with Matt Humphrey from Boston College. The last time he took a senior grad transfer, and then he kind of swore it off, and he hasn't done it until now. And then he got 3 of that type of guy. So again, not knocking the guys that we have, it's just different for Huggins. And so when you say, can anybody do it? It's Huggins. I agree with that. He swore it off for over 10 years before he came back to it. So that's.
Do you think he did that because he knew that he was potentially losing Taz, Sean McNeil, Deuce, and Culver? So you're losing a lot of that experienced. Those guys logged most of the minutes, and he wasn't sure of what he was getting to come back. So he probably thought, in order to remain competitive, not even like a top 15, but let's try to remain competitive, because otherwise I'm going to be trotting out Tash Thweet and Kedrian Johnson and some of these other not unproven but unproven young guys. Seni Njai would have had to take a bigger role. So I think that my thought is he did this year because he thought, I might lose the whole thing here, minutes wise. I need to just kind of restock the shelf real quick.
Yeah, and I think maybe the counter argument to this, I mean, I know or at least I do, you kind of get tunnel vision just looking at what WVU is doing. But I mean, we sat and watched as soon as the offseason started, the grind that was the transfer portal. And, we talked at length on some shows about just, I think it was Texas Tech, was an example of, I feel like they almost lost their entire, expected starting five, and then they pieced some things. I think some guys ended up staying. But at any rate, I think every school could probably say they've lost at least one or multiple people to the transfer portal. So, maybe it's a lot of people dealing with that same turnover, and different teams also having to figure it out in a short amount of time. So it's probably going to be an interesting season now that, and it may be an off season and a start of season thing that we see more of now with the way the portal works, to be honest.
So Josh, not to scare you, but we decided on the show, since we have been on your show a few times, and you always have a nice game for us to play, that Scoot was going to have a little game that he put together this week, and it's a game that we've played before on the show one or two times. It's a little game we like to call Pick Your Ears.
Pick your ears, Josh.
Pick your ears. So, Scoot, explain how this works, Scooty.
It's kind of a would you rather, if you will. I'll give you two options. This happens to be basketball themed, so I'll give you two options. You're gonna choose which one you would rather have.
Got it.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, we got 5 of these. So the first one, who would you rather have on your team, Deuce McBride or Jevon Carter?
So this is an easy game, huh? Wow. Who would I rather have on my team? Deuce McBride or Jevon Carter? I would say offensively, with love and respect to Jevon Carter, and he's improved his game in the NBA, I would go, if we're looking at WVU, I would go with Deuce McBride. With defense that's not as good as Carter's, you're giving up that, but the offense just so gifted in a sophomore year. If he would have stayed 2 more years, it would have even improved more. I'm going with Deuce McBride.
Well, that follows Scoot's coaching mentality, which is you got to score points to win a game.
That's right.
That's how Scoot coaches.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
I like that, Scoot. That's a good one.
Okay. Moving on.
Am I the only one playing?
I mean, Johnson, you want to weigh in on this, Johnson?
Well, I would have went with the way of Josh, because I think if you just encapsulate, we might want to let Jevon's pro career bleed in here a little bit, but I think if we just encapsulate it to his time at WVU, I think I'm going to go with the scorer too, and then you have to sacrifice some defense. But I was also such a fan of the way Deuce could take over a game offensively. I think I'd go that way too.
Yeah, I'm with you as well on that. I think I've got to go Deuce, just because I think as much as Jevon was fun to watch play, I think there were times and in games where Deuce was a little bit, the offense just makes it a little bit more entertaining than what Jevon did.
For me, I'm going Jevon. Jevon to me, this is not a slight to Deuce, but Jevon to me was more of a leader. He's more of a get in your face and say you can do better kind of guy. He was, hey, we've got this kind of problem. We're down 5. I'm going to rally the guys together here. We're going to talk about it during a foul or something. I think he's more that guy than Deuce was. Deuce was kind of, I just think it's difference in personality. I don't think that was Deuce's personality, but I think Jevon is the guy I would choose.
You can't go wrong either way, really. But
all right, moving on. I like to talk about the 6th man. We've had a couple of good 6th men here at WVU. Josh, pick your ears. Jaysean Page or Taz Sherman?
With love and respect to Taz Sherman, and he put together a great 6-man year last year, and it'll be interesting what role he'll have this year, if he'll be coming off the bench or starting. But senior year Jaysean Page was really something. 6-man, very tough. The super high jump shot, like the bring rain jump shot, and just so tough, and really a great part of that Press Virginia style. I would go, as of right now, with Jaysean Page.
Yeah, Scoot, I'm going to go with Josh too, because I think people forget just how much of a microwave guy Jaysean was too. Like you could insert him if you were having a lull, and he was like instant offense off the bench. I love Jaysean Page.
So I was thinking, I knew that Johnson would go Jaysean Page. Johnson is a big time Jaysean Page fan. he has never declared that, but anytime he talks about Jay Sean Page, he gets this big twinkle in his eye, and so I knew he would go that way.
Why wouldn't you though? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
There's
come
nothing wrong
on.
with that. That's right.
Guido?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go Jay Sean Page. I mean, we'll see what happens this year for Taz, but I think that Jay Sean Page just that his second year or senior year or whatever it was, because he was only there 2 years, right? He only played 2 years at WVU. I think that was, yeah, you're right. He was a standout there.
I would go Taz Sherman. And the reason why I would do that is because I think that Taz Sherman is maybe a little bit more of a versatile scorer. He's going to be able to hit the jump shot, but he's also going to get to the rim, and he likes to attack the basket some, whereas I felt Jay Sean at times was a little bit more of just a shooter. So I'm going Taz Sherman.
I feel like you're just trying to be contrary in this whole game we're
what
playing.
makes radio go. So that's what we're doing.
No bad answers. No bad answers.
Yeah,
All the
that's the
respect
truth.
for the guy's name
Yeah.
you don't say.
That's the
Okay,
truth.
next question here. Sean McNeil, who is a Josh favorite, I think, or Patrick Beeline.
Wow. Well, Patrick Beeline did not have a brand logo like Sean McNeil does. And Sean McNeil both could shoot the ball. Patrick Beeline, you thought he shot better than what he did because he was taking crazy contested shots or late in the shot clock. Hey, Pat Beeline, shoot it from 28 feet. But I've got to give the edge to Sean McNeil in that they both have similar roles, but Sean McNeil starts and Patrick Beeline didn't start for those teams. And a little bit of, his last name's Beeline, so he doesn't have any control over that. I'm giving my edge to Sean McNeil.
Scoot, I'm going to go with a bit of nostalgia on this one. I think this one tugs at my heartstrings a little bit. So I'm going to go Pat Beeline just because I also felt while he was out there, not only could he shoot, but he also felt like he added some on the floor coaching and leadership while he was on there. Not that Sean doesn't, but I think just being the coach's son and being tied in like that, I always kind of felt like he played that role a bit. So I'm gonna go Pat Beeline.
I'm gonna have to go, and Josh, rumor is I've heard that this term is being retired with the shot robot. I feel like that we're not allowed to say that anymore.
No, it's a free country, dude. I think he would not own that. If you hey, shot robot, he would actually turn his head the other way and keep walking. And thus, I feel like for me, need to retire that name.
Oh, I thought there was some sort of cease and desist letter or something that you got.
That may be coming, but to get ahead of that, that's why I'm retiring that.
As much as I feel like Patrick Beeline was the Buddy Boeheim before Buddy Boeheim, I feel like Sean McNeil he averaged double digits last year. I don't think Beeline ever averaged double digits. I don't think he ever had an average above probably 8 points. So I think that for me, I think Sean McNeil plays much more of a important role for the team than Patrick ever did.
I'm going to go Sean McNeil as well because I don't know that there's been a player in a long time where I've felt as comfortable with that person shooting from anywhere within the half court. Contested, uncontested. He's got a little bit of a Jimmer Fredette kind of feel for me where okay, you want to shoot from part of the flying WV? Go right ahead. Shoot from the, you want to, everybody else, you're what are they doing? Sean McNeil, I'm okay, he's probably going to make that. It's kind of crazy. So I'm a Sean McNeil guy. Patrick Beeline's a good player, but I still think that Sean McNeil's the better shooter for me.
And Pat Beeline always wore a jersey one size too big. And that may have been a Beeline team kind of thing. It always just looked like they all right, give me the medium and then they get the large, and everybody went one size up with the jersey. That's my only issue.
I feel like that's totally accurate.
I agree.
Big jerseys.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the big men.
All right.
These guys, two guys that have received advice, whether it be good or bad. Derek Culver or Sagaba Konate?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Oh, Scoot. Okay. So this is definitely an offense versus defense thing because Derek Culver, not good at defense, very good at offense, better rebounder, I would argue than Konate. And yet Konate, like a fine wine for me, his college career, not appreciating enough in the moment. And then as we get farther away from it, and as West Virginia hasn't had a guy like Konate, I've got to give in the well-made wine argument, I'm going to give it to Konate because when it's like, I think we were spoiled when he was here. I don't want to put that on anybody else. I was spoiled. Like, yeah, that's his job. That's what he does. And he does it very well. And I don't know if we're ever going to have another guy like that. I think he's got the block record for WVU in 2.5 seasons. Like, he didn't play a full third season, and he's got the block record for the university. I'm going to Konate.
Yeah, I am too, Scoot, just because, and it feels like, as I'm saying it, it doesn't feel like the right pick, but just for me, like, Sags was must-see TV. I mean, he was like, oh, ESPN's, like promos would have him two-hand blocking that dude from Kansas that will forever live in infamy as the guy that got two-hand blocked on his dunk. I mean, Sags was just must-see TV. And I think for that, it's a shame we didn't get more out of him. I think those teams would have went so much farther had he been a piece of that puzzle. I'm going to go with Sags.
Yeah, Scoot, I think I'm Sags too, and for a few reasons. I mean, one, I think the Sting is a lot older, and the pain's gotten to heal over time a little bit, and it was a family member that told Sags he should leave, so maybe that helped out a little bit as opposed to what's Johnson calling Miguel Tejada,
the former Oakland Athletics
former
shortstop.
second baseman.
That's how I remember him.
Miguel Tejada told Culver to leave. What in the world's going on?
He played
there?
baseball for Oakland. What does he know?
What does he know?
Come on.
And they both, and correct me, Sags went undrafted as well, right? So Derek went undrafted last week, and Sags went undrafted as well. Sags ended up signing and playing G League for a little bit. We'll see what happens with Derek, but I'm going Sags, and I agree with you guys. Like, just watching the defensive highlights, swatting the ball down was too much.
Well, I am for sure going Sags because sophomore year Sags, for me, and I know Johnson and I have had this conversation off air, he was must-see TV. You watched WVU games to see how many two-handed blocks Sags Konate was going to get. And it didn't seem like any moment was too big for him. He's two-hand blocking Vi Sekahema or whatever that guy's name was. I think that guy actually played for the Philadelphia Eagles. But he's...
I was getting ready to say. Did you say Superfly Snuka?
No, Vi Sekahema. I think it was like a kick returner for the Eagles.
I think he was, yeah.
But whatever that... what's that guy's name that played for Kansas? I don't know. The guy that two-handed blocked.
You said it.
Yeah. So he... that's Kansas, and he's going up two-hand blocking guys, and that was kind of Sags' big coming out party to the nation. I feel like that's getting Scott Van Pelt to talk about him, Dickie V to talk about him. I don't know that Derek Culver ever had that kind of cult personality. I think that both of them had their careers end abruptly and awkwardly. And again, maybe some bad advice. I know Sags wanted to go into the NBA after his sophomore season, went and got evaluated, and somebody told him, hey, Sags, don't play by the basket. Go shoot three-pointers because that's your ticket into the NBA. And he started doing that, and it didn't pay off, and then we got a knee injury, and things kind of unraveled from there.
Yeah, and in Derek Culver's defense, he just sort of went out. I mean, how many games were we texting each other, and you just realized Derek Culver had a double-double? And it was like he was just, doing his thing, grinding it out, getting rebounds, making putbacks, stuff like that, and suddenly he'd have 12 and 10 or something, and it felt like he wasn't even really doing anything flashy.
I would argue that maybe sophomore season for both of those guys was their pinnacle of their college careers, and that's kind of odd to see. Maybe some of what Deuce was thinking, I finished my sophomore career, maybe things get worse. I don't know. But it's just interesting. I would have gone Sags.
And we did not take the guy who was first team all Big 12 in his junior year. So both good guys, different players.
Right. Okay. Last one, Josh. Okay. This is a basketball themed one again. We're going to rename the Coliseum. Okay. Tudor's Biscuit Basket or the Country Club Bakery Oven? What are you calling it?
You've saved the toughest for last. So Country Club Bakery, I had the pepperoni roll finally this year at Country Club Bakery. It was delightful. Scoot. It's a different pepperoni roll than what I've had in the past. Definitely yummy. But if you can get Tudor's on the name of the Coliseum,
am I right?
And you're saying biscuit basket, and somebody's saying we're going to get now to the biscuit basket. That's just, I love that idea in my head. And we're live biscuit basket, and they may not even leave they may leave Tudor's out, and Tudor's would be upset because they paid for the rights.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want people to say biscuit basket. And so I'm going with Tudor's.
Scoot, I think you got to go Tudor's Biscuit Basket too, but then that means Tudor's has to then start providing concessions at the Biscuit Basket.
Get
right?
you a Ron.
It's like a pack. It's
Get
like
you
a
Dottie. You gonna have a Dottie at the big game tonight?
That's what I'm saying. It's like you got to do that, right? It's got to be available. I'm also going Tudor's Biscuit Basket.
I feel like I've been put in a very uncomfortable situation here. Just because I'm friends with the owner of Country Club Bakery, and it's my hometown. So I'm going to have, yes, Tudor's Biscuit Basket sounds amazing.
Like Defend it's an amazing turf, Guido. Defend the turf.
But I have to go with Country Club Bakery. Because it is.
It's a better option than calling it the Pokey Dot or something like that. We could have called it the Pokey Dot, which would have been ridiculous as well. But I, of course...
Muriel's Spaghetti Bowl?
Yes.
That's what you can call it?
I, of course, would go Tudor's Biscuit Basket. One, I think I like biscuits better than pepperoni rolls.
Oh, that's a conversation for another
that's a rough take.
Show, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Two, I believe Tudor's has a wider assortment of things to eat. So I think the concessions idea would be great because you're not just getting pepperoni rolls, you're getting all kinds of things.
We would argue, though, what else do you need in some cases?
I get that.
I went to a basketball game 2 years ago with Johnson. I think he had like 4 pepperoni rolls and a Diet Coke.
Delicious.
And Tudor's does have the Peppy, which is pepperoni in the biscuit sandwich.
Yeah.
So
they cover
could get that. My concern with the biscuit basket from the stadium experience is that my fear is you get your Tudor's biscuit and they give you, just like at Tudor's, like one napkin. Oh. And so that'd be a limiting on napkins. That's probably
imagine having to be the cleanup crew in the amount of like biscuit crumbs all over the floor.
Yes, that's a good point.
In the Coliseum.
That's a solid point.
I don't know.
Your Mountaineer biscuit that's like 4 inches high, and here's one napkin.
Yes.
Have a great day.
And everyone's just like,
quit being stingy with the napkins.
Well, thanks, Scoot, for having that. We always appreciate a Pick Your Ears on our show here. And guys, don't forget, check out Josh's show, Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about WVU basketball. Josh, I heard you have some awesome guests on this week too.
I do. There's these guys that's in various states that meet online on a fairly regular basis, not as much regular in the off season. And I've got the Got Your Ears On guys. So check out this week's episode. We're going to pick our foxhole team, snake draft style, from current and former WVU basketball players. So definitely check that out. Spoiler alert, we laugh a lot.
That's true. Yeah, check it out. Unreasonable Doubt, available on wherever you can find podcasts, Apple and Spotify and Castbox. So don't forget to check out Josh's show. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. We always love talking to you.
Guys, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, it was great talking with Josh as always. We loved being on his podcast this week, and Scoot loves asking random questions. You really set Josh on his heels this week, Scoot.
I like to keep him on his toes. I think sometimes he gets a little too relaxed having a show by himself. He, doesn't have anyone to kind of throw him off, other than maybe some kind of background sound that might startle him. So I thought
Josh is ready, though.
I thought I would try to startle him a little
quick.
bit.
He's quick thinking, though. He did well.
He's quick. He's fast. So thanks, Josh, for being on the show, guys. We're gonna take a break. We'll be back with another show here in a couple of weeks, preparing for football season. And guess what? I have big news. Once we're back on the next show, we're back to weekly. So we come back in 2 weeks. We do a show, and we're back to being back every week. This whole summer break stuff we've been doing, it's over because football season starts. And so we'll do our football preseason preview. We'll pick our games in that show. That'll be exciting.
Football will be played this month.
Football will be played. I'm excited, guys. I tell you, we'll talk about it next show. I'm high on this team. We'll see how preseason practices are. I got my Jared Dagey jersey on order, Scoot.
Okay.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget, you can find us online. Look for us on Instagram and Twitter at Got Your Eers On, and Facebook. Just search Got Your Ears. And don't forget, check out our website, gotyourearson.com. Johnson, it's like the hub of everything in Got Your Ears On world.
Yeah, it is. So we post each show there on the site in blog form, and we tag all the show notes we talked about, probably even stuff we didn't, with all the links if you'd like to check it out. You can also click through to our merch store and shop for some cool merch, maybe a pullover guy shirt, to benefit that fund. And we also post the latest show, the tune in link for it, right on the page, so you can listen right on the page. So check it out.
Yeah, check it out, gotyourearson.com. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next week. You've been listening to Got Your Ears On.